Welcome to episode 4 of the Gray Havens podcast, not to be confused with the Blue Flower podcast, which episodes 1 and 2 were called. We just figured this would be easier for searchability. Yes, searchability. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the third single off of our upcoming album Blue Flower, entitled Endless Summer. We're going to be talking about the writing process, the recording process, as well as how this song sort of was inspired in part by C.S. Lewis's story. If you're just joining us for the first time, this album was inspired in large part by C.S. Lewis's autobiography, Surprised by Joy. And that's where we're headed today. So if that sounds interesting, stick around. And without further ado, here we go. In the last episode on Rhythm of the East, I talked about how we were, with that song, starting to introduce the second major theme on the album, the first one being joy. The album is inspired by C.S. Lewis's autobiography, Surprised by Joy, and that feeling, that inconsolable longing and desire and enormous bliss is the first theme, and kind of coming at that through different angles and perspectives. And the second theme, if I had to, subtitle the album, it would be Blue Flower, When Summer Meets Winter. We almost called it that, but just for the sake of simplicity, we called it Blue Flower. And the reason for this summer meets winter imagery is because that is what Lewis chooses to use in a lot of his fictional and non-fictional writings. He's talking about this cosmic summer overtaking this cosmic winter. We read that quote last time about when joy does return finally after a many-year absence, around 14 years old. He says that all of the deep layers of secular ice break up in a single moment, and it's almost like this flash of summer, and then it disappears again. This summer-winter dichotomy, battle, struggle, finds its way into a lot of Lewis's writings, both in his fiction and in his nonfiction. In his fiction, probably most famously, we have the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where it is always winter and never Christmas. This endless winter is characterized, perhaps most famously, in Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where I love the scene. I'm sure I'm the 1051st podcaster who has quoted this scene, but it's famous for a reason. It's so good, where Lucy stumbles into Narnia, where it's always winter and never Christmas, through the wardrobe, and Tumnus, the fawn, is trying to figure out, where she came from, and to make sure that she's a daughter of Eve because he's a secret spy for the witch, which we find out later. And Lucy says that she gets in through the wardrobe in the spare room. And Mr. Tumnus kind of comically mishears where she's from in his invitation for her to have tea with him. He says, "Daughter of Eve, from the far land of spare where eternal summer reigns, around the bright city of Wardrobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me?" Later on in the book, the White Witch's magic begins to weaken. Spring is on the way. The witch and her posse, group, I don't know what to call them, they are sledding through the wood and noticing that in a few hours or so, it goes from January to May. It says, quote, "They hadn't even known for certain, as the witch did, that this was what would happen when Aslan came to Narnia. But they all knew that it was her spells which had produced the endless winter. And therefore they all knew when this magic spring began that something had gone wrong, and badly wrong, with the witch's schemes." Or schemes? Schemes. I've mentioned previously that we were trying to record the album in the final order that it would live in. We hadn't had a down song yet on the album, and this was the third track, so we wanted to see if we could carry the song with just a few elements and lead it with the piano, which ended up being way harder than we thought. We tried out so many different arrangements for this song. Some had beats, some didn't, some got, really massive at the end, but we were trying to, again, keep it as sparse as possible and still compelling. For the intro to the song, we tried all kinds of different things. We tried it with the piano starting the song, maybe some other instrument, synth or strings or something, but in the end, it ended up being this vocal stacked on top. Well, what happened was we were just sitting down. We have this microphone attached to my desk on a boom arm, so when we're producing, it's a smallish room, and it's just really two chairs next to a desk, and we're playing musical chairs a lot of the time. If one of us has an idea, we'll just jump on the computer to sketch it out or whatever, but Ben just turned to me and said, "Hey, would you just do like 10 passes of you singing into that mic, kind of wandering around on ooh in the key of A?" And so that's what we did. And it ended up, in my opinion, being an intriguing intro idea. The lyrical nature of the song, or the picture that it's trying to paint in the first verse, is this endless. It's setting up for the question, are we in for an endless winter? So we needed it to sound kind of like winter, or that was the goal in verse 1, and I stumbled across this wintry sounding synth patch that I found that we tweaked and messed with until it sounded like this. So really in verse 1, there are just three main elements: the synth, the stacked vocals, and the piano. The piano part that I brought to Ben was just these, thirds in the bass and pulsing right hand that sounds like this. I just moved over a couple feet to my piano next to my desk. And it did that all the way through the progression, but Ben had the idea on the last chord to sort of, complete the idea or make it feel like a more, tie a bow at the end of your progression type thing. He has these really good ideas, but his idea was to love that part that he made, that. And that's it. We recorded, I played that through, and I think we then ran it through a tape machine plug-in, and Ben tweaked it a little bit and made it sound a bit wobbly. It sounds like this. I don't know if you heard it, but there's that mechanical noise that you hear, and I think that's just me either shifting in my chair or me lifting the pedal up in a weird way or accidentally bumping the piano. But I love moments like that in audio recording that you can never get on a sample instrument. I smile every single time I hear that part because, it just sounds human to me. All right. So the lyrics of verse 1 are asking the question that maybe Lewis would ask, have you ever missed somewhere that you've never been before? the question is really just tapping into the heart of what I think most human beings experience is, which they look around at the world and, there's all kinds of injustice, suffering, pain, and the impulse is for a utopia with no suffering, no pain, endless love, peace. Maybe as the Bible would say, shalom, a kingdom, Eden. But, where does that come from? I think Lewis would ask the question, how do you get that impulse from a mindless universe or a cosmic, winter? He makes this argument from desire when he, says, if I find in myself a desire for which nothing on this earth can satisfy, isn't it reasonable that one of the options is that we were made for another world? He, when he's an atheist, I'm going to quote here from Mere Christianity. This is Lewis, years and years later after being this atheistic pessimist. He says, quote, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? If the whole show was bad and senseless from A to Z, so to speak, why did I, who was supposed to be part of the show, find myself in such violent reaction against it? A man feels wet when he falls into water because man is not a water animal. A fish would not feel wet. Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own. But if I did that, then my argument against God collapsed too, for the argument depended on saying that the world really was unjust, not simply that it did not happen to please my fancies. Thus, in the very act of trying to prove that God did not exist, in other words, that the whole of reality was senseless, I found I was forced to assume that one part of reality, namely my idea of justice, was full of sense. Consequently, atheism turns out to be too simple. If the whole universe has no meaning, we should have never found out that it has no meaning. Just as, if there was no light in the universe and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. Dark would be a word without meaning.
Have you ever missed somewhere that you've never been before? Like there's a memory there, except you don't remember anymore.
When we got to the chorus section of the song, my impulse was to add something to it. In each section, typically the thought is when you're building a song out, you want something new to enter at each section, whether that's the next chorus or the next turn or the next verse or whatever. And Ben, instead, his impulse was to take everything away at the chorus. And that's actually another useful way to create dynamic moves in a song. And that's the same thing that actually happens at the end of the song. Instead of for the final chorus, to be this big anthemic, everything's in, instead we take everything away except for the voices, and was a really good lesson for me in learning how to try and create impact with less.
We got a longer way to go. They say we're in for an endless winter till we're gone. But when I search that sunrise, feels like I belong to an endless.
For verse 2, just to build on the foundation that we had sort of laid out in verse 1, we just added a few things. We added a synth bass. We added a little bit of a beat. It's subtle, but definitely helps. That's some vocoder that Ben threw on some of those background vocals. And then here's everything in.
giving standing room to the cold for now, but not a place upon a throne. No.
That line, I'm giving standing room to the cold for now, but not a place upon a throne, was inspired by this book that really sent me down the path of wanting to dig into Lewis's writings again. I mentioned it in an earlier episode. It's a book called Planet Narnia, in which the author Michael Ward argues that Lewis archetypes his Narnian books off of the 7 different planets in the medieval planetary system. Very fascinating book. Recommend it for sure. I'm convinced. But there was this, in his chapter on Saturn, there was this line. I can't get into the whole chapter for a proper run-up, but he says, quote, "Thus Lewis's model of the universe has standing room for bleakness, but no throne." And I highlighted that, and I thought, I got to use that somehow, somewhere on the album. And oddly enough, we talked about it a little bit before with the less is more, as far as sometimes taking things away creates more dynamic impact. My favorite part on the song is the final chorus when everything does go away. The bottom drops out, so to speak, except for the voices. And specifically within the voices, there's this one moving part that I love so much that Ben vocoded out of our vocal takes. Here's what that sounds like on its own, and then I'll play the final chorus as a whole.
Somewhere are we meant for an endless summer on and on.
One final piece of commentary on the production before we get Alicia here in the studio is that and outro piano part that you heard there at the end is a musical theme that we'll end up developing and reusing and weaving in to some of the other songs on the album, including the last song on the album. And it's to me, it's the Winter's Gone theme or Summer Sun theme, and just a note that you will definitely hear it again. Okay, let's get Alicia in the studio. All right, we have Alicia here in the house, in the studio.
Yo.
Which we have named the Blue Flower after having recorded the album here. So the studio is called the Blue Flower now. And you just found a Blue Flower tapestry thing for some music videos we just recorded on Amazon.
Yeah, it was actually black and white, and then we shone a blue light on it.
Yeah,
It worked out.
Okay, let me get your thoughts on Endless Summer. What are your memories from the writing to recording process? Anything that sticks out?
I don't remember a lot.
I already talked about how
it was just, yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah. Difficult to write, difficult to produce. You thought about scrapping it at some point, I'm pretty sure.
That's right.
Even like fairly late in the production process of the record, you were like,
yeah, this was
we save it?
Yeah, in the last few days we tried to save it because I was going to scrap it from the album. I just didn't think it was up to par with where I felt like the other songs were, and so it was a last ditch attempt in the last few days with Ben to just completely rework it. So, anything else?
I think for me, when I first hear you start a song, it's just you and the piano. And sometimes it's hard for me to start hearing things change when it comes to production. Mm-hmm. And I think I felt like that a little bit with this song, especially because it was a struggle.
Yeah.
It was pretty just simple and beautiful with you and the piano.
Right.
And it was kind of hard to get out of that demo love. In a way, I felt like that with other songs too. And in hindsight, I always love how the record turns out better. But I do think that in the end, it kind of came together feeling like beautiful and intimate, but really interesting too. And
yeah, that's interesting. You do
really
have
happy with
demo
it.
love, but not with any kind of demo. Your
Right.
demo love is like, you've heard me play it on the piano a million times.
Yeah, I
For
demo
you.
love like the live
Right.
simple performance.
Right.
And so,
Which is really hard to kind of replicate on recording because there's no tempo. You can sing it very freely and expressively. You're not following any rules, really. You have the added benefit of a real human voice in a real room, in a real space, and a nice sounding piano. So it's hard to sometimes record something that when you play it back sounds like it's better than that.
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be special magic with a real piano and a real voice sitting right next to you. And so, and in a way, I'm like overly spoiled to get to hear that, especially hear it so many times throughout the writing process. And then it's hard to let other things in on that at first.
Yeah.
But
crowds the space.
yeah. But for the medium of like a record, it really, the songs do need more. You can't just
you can't just do all
keep
acoustics.
it there.
Yeah.
But
Cool. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for your memories, inputs, recollections. It's always good to kind of remember with you, like, what happened?
what happened?
What happened? How did we get here? All right. Until next time, thanks for stopping by.
Bye.
And I think that's where we're going to leave it today. The next episode will obviously be about the next song in the album called It's Possible. I think the song will be out before the podcast is finished, and I'd be curious if anyone could figure out where in Lewis's story that song is a reference to. Until next time, we are going to finish things out by playing our song in its entirety, Endless Summer. Thanks so much for listening. I really do hope these podcast episodes enhance the listening experience, provide some more context and background in a way that allows you to appreciate the song more when you hear it again. If you like the podcast, it helps us a lot. If you like, subscribe, share with friends via word of mouth or social media or whatever. Everything helps to spread the word about our music and the podcast. So thanks again for listening. And here's our song, Endless Summer.
Have you ever missed somewhere that you've never been before? Like there's a memory there, except you don't remember anymore. I feel the weight in the silence, and when the night starts getting cold. And it's been like that for a long, long time. And I heard we got a longer way to go. They say we're in for an endless winter, till we're gone. But when I search that sunrise, feels like I belong to an endless summer. Somewhere are we meant for an endless summer, on and on. Have you ever wanted so bad to believe in something more? Then one day all that's holding you back just doesn't hold a candle anymore to the stars at sunrise. So while I find out where the school's, I'm giving standing room to the cold for now, but not a place upon a throne. No, they say we're in for an endless